What is up, everybody? We today are going to talk about some March Madness sleeper teams and some teams that are a little bit overhyped, overrated. Let's start off with the duds, boys. Connor, who's a dud? Who's a team that's overrated, overhyped, all that nonsense?
One of my duds, my biggest dud is North Carolina. I think when a team that is right around one player goes into March Madness, it's usually always unsuccessful. I think the way North Carolina's played recently with around RJ Davis, he's been doing everything. He scored 45 points recently to save an upset from happening, and Armando Bacot has just been nowhere to be found lately. He hasn't been shooting the ball. North Carolina's defense is looking pretty rough for the most part. I think when your best player has to score 45 points to win games or around that area almost every week, it's hard to kind of get a good feeling about a team. I think North Carolina, the way they're playing right now, it's looking kind of scary for March. So that's one of my duds.
It's always interesting when you put a blue blood in a team that's, or in
Yeah,
a dud type of discussion. I don't think this North Carolina team is good enough to win a championship or even make a Final Four appearance, anything like that. That being said, though, I think their defense is more than strong enough to compensate and get them at least, past the Sweet 16 or to the Sweet 16 at minimum. So I don't think I would necessarily put them into that overhyped, overrated category. I think they're somewhere more in that gray area in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, especially if players like Baycott and them pick it up, I think they'll be fine. But they're looking rough right now. They're in a rough patch, and I don't have a lot of faith in them if they keep playing like this. So
Hey, Tyler, hit us up with one of your duds.
my number one dud going into March Madness is Arizona. And the reason for that is I'm not a big fan of the talent right now in the Pac 12 regarding basketball. I know a few years ago they all kind of popped off in the tournament, those Pac 12 teams. But this year I just really don't like the quality of basketball being played in the Pac 12. Also with Arizona, their pace of play I think is like the fastest in the country or one of the fastest in the country. And that can make you really streaky in March Madness, and that can kill you if you're playing too fast. It's really hard to slow down in a high pressure game like that. So if your players just really aren't built for it to make these big shots and make these big plays on the biggest stage, I think that could kill them. Just given that the way they play is just like go go go, constantly trying to score buckets. So I think that could come and backfire them, and they've been able to do that high pace of play because they've been playing in the Pac-12, which I don't think has been that great this year. So they've just been able to outrun teams and outscore on these teams. But when it comes to March and you're playing different conferences and different teams, I think that could be an issue for them.
Yeah, Arizona definitely. Boswell, one of their guards, he has to play well in order for them to win. Former five-star recruit, chose Arizona over schools like Kansas and some other blue bloods. He's been a key to their success. He's one of the better rounded guards in the country, and playing alongside Caleb Love is a pretty big thing. Especially Arizona has a lot of tournament experience.
Mhm.
Omar Ballo in the paint. You have Caleb Love, obviously. They have a lot of good talent. It's just the fact that their pace of play can cause them, and it's cost them this year. They got
Yeah.
swept by Washington State. They lost to Oregon State on the road. They've had bad losses that makes them look
Mhm.
like not the best team all around. So it's just they are an interesting team to look at for sure.
Yeah, and for a team that plays that fast, I haven't loved the way they've been shooting the ball. It's been all right, but your star player in Love has been shooting like 35% from three this year, which is not that great for being a team that plays that fast and will probably rely on the three in March if you're playing that fast.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Maybe let's hit up one more dud before we move on to some of our studs. I gotta go with the Baylor Bears as my number one dud. This is an offensive dependent team, a team we've seen lose by 20 plus to the Spartans. Came into that game sitting at 5-5, had a losing record actually, 4-5. My mistake. So it's a team that's so offensive dependent. We've seen it time and time again in March Madness. Those teams that live and die by their offense. They're teams that can either go on crazy runs or teams that will fizzle out in the first round. And I think with Baylor, their defense isn't good enough to compensate for if their offense doesn't show up. And I don't think their offense is good enough like in years past with like where it's the number one undisputed offense in the country. They're not at that stage either. So I think I just gotta say they're a dud with where they're sitting at. Their offense could, it could get them a game or two, but I don't see them going past that.
Okay. I mean, I could see. I'm a little bit more in favor of Baylor just because they've been slower as they were in previous years playing the game, which I like going into March. I know their defense is a problem, but I think they're good enough to get through the first few rounds, just offensive dependent. I don't know if they'll get upset, but they're definitely not a team that's going to go make the Final Four. I think they're probably Sweet 16, Elite Eight out rather than the first round. Um, yeah, that's just my thoughts on Baylor.
I can see that for sure.
Yeah, Baylor's usually a pretty well coached team when it comes to March. I
Yeah.
don't really see them getting upset a ton, especially with the talent they have on their roster. Like every single year, they usually have a pretty good core, especially in the guard area. I think that Baylor, I don't see them winning it all, but I can definitely see them like making a run to the Final Four, like in my honest opinion, especially if they catch a streak. But again, you have to catch a streak, and I can see why they could be a dud as well if they definitely just come in and they hit rock bottom on offense. So.
Sure.
Definitely a risky pick for your bracket. Picking
Mhm.
Baylor to go deep.
Yeah, you're just living and dying by the three ball.
Mhm.
We've seen that work before, Villanova in the years past live and die by the three. It works sometimes. So, it just kind of depends on if they can show up consistently.
And we know a lot about risky picks for the Final Four, Tyler.
Yep.
All right. Let's get into some studs, ladies and gentlemen. Or, wait. Yeah, no, studs. Okay. I'm going to redo that. Okay. That was bad. That was ugly. Ladies and gentlemen, here are our studs. Connor, lead us off.
My number one stud for this year is the Utah State Aggies. I think the way they are playing all around basketball right now is insane. They look like one of the more complete teams. In Mountain West basketball, something to not be slept on. There are a lot of good teams that can make runs in March Madness this year. Utah State is looking like the best team from that conference, in my opinion. They shoot the ball very well. They play defense very well. They're a very well-oiled machine in a way. I think that the way they've been able to go on the road and beat teams as also hold their own at their home end is pretty good. They look, from what I've watched them a solid amount this year because I'm interested in Mountain West basketball. It's one of my favorite conferences to watch because the home arenas are so electric and the atmosphere is one of the most underrated things in the country. I think that Utah State definitely brings that energy of no one expects us to be here. No one expects us to be this good. We're going to go out and prove people wrong. And I think a team like that going into March is dangerous to play. Nobody's going to want to play this team in March.
I could see them doing decent. I think I could see them making it to the Sweet 16 at the absolute max, but I don't see a ceiling beyond that. I don't know. Are you guys kind of in that same boat?
Yeah, you just hope they don't get put against one of those 12 seeds. That's just crazy, because they're probably going to be in that 5 to 6 range. So you just hope they don't get put against one of those 12 seeds that should be 8 seeds. You know what I mean? But yeah, I could see them winning a few games. I think the quality in that conference has been pretty decent this year, better than it's ever been. So they've definitely been used to playing against better competition than they have in previous years.
Yeah, for sure. Solid pick, Connor. Solid pick. Tyler, hit us up with your first stud.
Yeah, my first stud, they're right now currently a projected 10 seed, somewhere between 8 and 10, and that is Virginia. I really love Virginia in March. Ever since they had that 16 seed run in, they've been great in March. They currently have like the 9th best defense in college basketball, which is, defense wins the championships. Defense can upset teams if you're playing good defense. So I think Virginia can make a run. They also are so miserable to play against because their pace of play is so slow. It's so grueling. It's brutal to play against, and they just wear you down on defense. So that's a team in March. They're also getting hot right now. They're getting hot at the right time. They struggled earlier in the season. Now they're starting to pick it up a little bit. So Virginia's a team that's warming up at the right time, and I would definitely look out for them in March.
Okay.
Me personally, I always play against Virginia, and it usually tends to work out. And the only reasons is these teams come in against a 4 seeded Virginia, and they tend to not even outplay them really. They get lucky. Teams against Virginia have to get lucky, and unfortunately, it's happened for them with Furman last year, with Ohio a couple of years ago. Like it happens to them.
This is a 10 seed now, though. This is a 10 seed
Yeah,
Virginia.
this is a
This is
10
a
seed
different
Virginia.
Virginia.
It's a different Virginia, which is why I love this pick because they could really shock some people. The thing about Virginia though is if their offense doesn't show up, it's rough.
Hmm.
Because I saw a game recently. They lost to Virginia Tech, I think, by like almost 30 points because Virginia Tech's offense showed up and Virginia's defense
Yeah.
did all they could. But when Virginia's offense scores 48 points, you can't really win.
Hmm.
It's really tough. So Virginia has some scary moments, but they have some really good moments, and they
Yeah.
are hot right now. So I respect that pick.
Their defense is tough to bet against right now. I feel like going into March, and when you're the worst team, when you're the lower seed, if you can shut down a team, that's how you make the upset. So I really like Virginia, maybe winning a 10-7 matchup and then going on to potentially beat a week or 2 seed.
All right, all right. Moving on to my first stud of the day. I'm going to go with the TCU Horned Frogs, currently sitting 5th in the Big 12, projected to be around an 8 or a 9 seed currently. And, this is a team that's ranked top 30 both offensively and defensively. They got some big names in Emmanuel Miller and Jameer Nelson Jr., son of former NBA player Jameer Nelson, of course. I think when you got that kind of star power, you're playing well in the Big 12, and you're ranked high offensively and defensively. It's really tough to bet against you. It's never the best position to be an 8 seed because you're playing a 1 seed round 2 after winning that first game. But I think this is a team that has upset potential in that second round versus whoever that 1 seed will be. And obviously, depending on who it is, I think that does make a big difference too. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I like that pick. I mean, they're the team that handed Houston one of their 3 losses. So they handed the best team in the country one of their 3 losses this season. So that means they have that potential to make the upset. So I do really like that pick with TCU.
I think, yeah, I also like it because I mean they're hot right now, and Jameer Nelson Jr. is playing out of his mind.
Yeah, he's tough. He's tough.
He's very tough, and I didn't even know Jameer Nelson had a son until this year.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's that.
All right, Connor, give us another stud, my guy.
Another stud I have is Nebraska. I think that their guard play has been superb lately. I will say they are a little streaky, but I think that the way that they play tough, they play physical basketball. They're again their guard play has been really good. I think that's a good combination for March. One thing I have a little bit worried about them is they're a little bit home oriented. If their fans show up though to where they're playing, I think they'll be just fine. Nebraska has one of the best fan bases in college athletics, so their fans show up usually no matter what. And I think if they get a game close to Nebraska, I think it's going to be basically a home game for them, and I think they'll have a huge advantage in that category. So that's one of my favorite teams right now for March.
Yeah, for sure. Fourth in the Big Ten is really impressive. That's a really tough conference. They've had a couple of big wins and some close losses. They beat Wisconsin, they beat Purdue, had a close loss to Illinois, beat Michigan State. Those are good games, honestly. And when you can perform against high level teams like that, it shows that you have the capabilities of making a run in March. I think one of the biggest indicators of success is success versus good teams, not just beating up on horrible teams. So I think that even though they don't have the greatest record, I don't think you can overlook Nebraska at all. They have shown they can compete at the highest level.
100%.
Tyler, hit us with a stud.
Yeah, so this is kind of my pick to be like a Cinderella story, like your Loyola Chicago, your Oral Roberts of this year. I'm going to go with McNeese State, currently projected at a 12 to 13 seed range. They're 25-3, which is pretty ridiculous. I know that their strength of schedule is not great, but a lot of these teams that you see make the runs in March Madness from weak conference are just unbelievable in conference play. So I love that they're 25-3. They haven't lost by double figures in their 3 losses, which means they're keeping games close anyway. They have some decent wins. They beat VCU, who's a solid team. I know Michigan's not that good this year, but they still beat them, and that's still a competitive basketball team and a good conference. So you do like to see that out of McNeese State. And the way they play, they're so balanced. They don't rely on offense or defense so heavily, and I think that's important in making a Cinderella story. So I do like McNeese State this year, and I think 25-3 with how hot they are, they could just go right down into March, right into maybe Sweet 16, Elite Eight. So I'd watch out for them.
I could honestly see that too, and they also have a star in Shahada Wells, amazing
Yeah,
perimeter defender, amazing scorer, and just all around player. So I think when you have one good leader like that too, it just helps all the more in making March Madness runs. A guy that's always going to be dependable, guys that other people can lean on. So I agree completely. McNeese State could make a run.
yeah,
I
and
could
their whole starting five is averaging 10 points per game plus almost. So you do also like to see that they have very balanced scoring, which is
Yeah,
also important.
for sure.
Yes, I can definitely see them pulling like a Chattanooga from last year. I can
Yeah,
definitely see them making at least like the Sweet Six. They didn't make the Sweet 16, but I can see them making some noise. They have a lot
yeah,
of really good players. They're well rounded, and on KenPom, usually you see teams like this with like a high luck percentage. They're low. They've been
yeah,
winning games just outright.
yeah,
Their strength schedule actually isn't. Their strength schedule is 71st. Apparently,
yeah. Which
from what
yeah,
I'm
it's
looking at,
not like
and it's not
favorable,
bad
but
at all. Like
yeah.
it's better than Houston's.
Hmm.
So I genuinely think McNeese State. That's a really good pick. I think they could definitely make a run. I'm actually kind of
Yeah,
excited
and
to put them in my
they've been
studs.
teams
So
they've been floating in that. They've gotten some votes for top 25. They haven't made it, but they've been floating in that range. So they're also getting some recognition. I think a lot of people like McNeese State this year, so I would put them on your bracket for Cinderella story.
mhm.
All right, I will hit up my second stud for y'all, and I'm gonna have to go with no bias, no bias. The Michigan State Spartans. You know, this is a team that's sitting at 17-11, not the most impressive record in the world by any means, projected to be an 8 or 9 seed currently. But that being said, they have one of the hardest schedules in the country, and they are coached by Tom Izzo. They will
Yeah,
always be a threat in March, and the roster honestly is loaded at every position except for center, and that has been their Achilles heel all season long. So it's really going to come down to if they can overcome that and figure out a rotation that works in terms of who's out there at center. And rebounding's been a problem, defense has been a problem. So I know Izzo has been just trying out new rotations lately, trying to get that figured out. But top to bottom, they have experience, they have youth, like 5-star talent in Xavier Booker. So it's a team that has everything you need, all the key components to make a run. It's just a matter if they can fix their minor issues and put it all together.
yeah, I like that pick. I also had them as a stud. I mean, I'm never going to bet against Izzo in March. It always seems like Michigan State are beating some teams they shouldn't in March Madness, and I do like that pick.
I also like it. Bias aside, I also like it. So
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right, folks. Well, that's gonna do it for today. Let us know some of your studs and duds down there in the comments. Who do you see making runs? Who do you see fizzling out early on? What 16 seeds do you see winning? All that good stuff. So, you know what? Get ready for March. It's coming.
It's coming.